The Evolving Landscape of AI and SEO, June 2025. Introduction. For the past 10 plus years, the SEO strategy has followed a proven, repeatable cycle. Research identify relevant keywords, user questions, and search intent using tools like SEMrush, Google Autocomplete, and people also ask data. Create content, develop high quality, informative content designed to address those queries in a way that's useful, engaging, and optimized for search engines. Publish, add the content to your website, incorporating internal linking, optimized metadata, and strong UX fundamentals. Notify Google, submit new or updated content through Google Search Console to ensure timely crawling and indexing. Wait and monitor watch as Google evaluates the content. If it's deemed helpful and relevant, rankings improve, bringing in organic traffic. Build trust. As content proves itself over time, Google increases trust in the domain. Authority builds. Rankings rise faster. Future content ranks more quickly. Repeat. The cycle continues. The more quality content you produce and optimize, the faster the growth compounds. Why this worked? This approach worked because it was built around user intent, which aligns with the goals of search engines. Google's primary objective has always been to serve users the most relevant, useful results based on the keywords they type in. By consistently publishing content that clearly addressed the underlying problems, questions, and needs behind those search queries, businesses aligned themselves with Google's mission and were subsequently rewarded with prominent placement in the SERPs. Why this approach has become less effective in recent times. The declining effectiveness of traditional SEO methodology is the result of a convergence of factors. First, the landscape for quality content has reached a saturation point in a lot of industries. Nearly every business with SEO ambitions is producing optimized content, making it harder to stand out no matter how well executed the strategy is. The standard playbook is known, and for lack of a better expression, solved. Second, Google's own shift toward AI-generated summaries is reducing the visibility of organic search results, often bypassing links entirely in favor of quick, direct answers. Third, and probably the most prominent reason is that user behavior is changing, is the emergence of AI chatbots and LLMs. Google's monolithic presence as the primary and default vehicle to seek information is fading. This is illustrated by the decline in dominance we're seeing. Google's search market share has dropped below 90% for the first time in over a decade, signaling that its grip on information flow is loosening. Taken together, these changes are eroding the once reliable pipeline of attention that traditional SEO depended on. Why users are migrating away from Google? The short answer is AI, and more specifically, chatbots and LLMs. Users are increasingly migrating away from Google, not simply because of the rise of AI, but because Google is no longer acting like the Google of old. This isn't the first time the company has misjudged its audience. We saw it with Google Plus, a tone-deaf attempt to enter the social media space under the assumption that Gmail's ubiquity would all but guarantee that users would migrate away from upstarts like Facebook and Twitter. They didn't. And we saw it again with Google Glass, which collapsed under the weight of privacy concerns and cultural backlash. These weren't just product failures. They were fundamental misunderstandings of user trust and brand alignment. Now, by aggressively inserting AI into the search experience, Google is once again stepping outside its lane. The brand was built on helping people discover information, not serving it in prepackaged, prominently displayed snippets based on opaque AI summaries. Users are noticing the shift from discovery to dictation, and the effectiveness of using Google as a tool to ascertain information and knowledge is in decline as a result, and this is reflected in their use dominance. And for a company that built its empire on neutrality, the loss of choice feels like a betrayal. So if AI is the future, many users seem to be saying fine, but it doesn't have to be Google's. Where Google screwed up, it didn't have to go this way. But Google, it seems, hasn't learned from the mistakes of its predecessors. The company that once championed open access to information has begun curating it instead, deciding unilaterally which sources are credible, summarizing answers with AI, and effectively diluting the user's ability to explore, compare, and decide for themselves. In doing so, Google has abandoned the very principle that made it successful, helping users discover answers on their own terms. This shift to users feels less like innovation and more like control. Users notice when autonomy is taken away, and history shows that when dominant platforms begin dictating behavior instead of enabling it, whether it's Microsoft in the early 2000s or Facebook in the 2010s, people eventually look elsewhere. Google abused its relationship with marketers. Another, perhaps even more critical misstep in Google's evolution was the way it gradually created an adversarial relationship with the very marketers and businesses that helped build its dominance. In the early days, Google's openness was part of its appeal. Search data was accessible and easy to understand and report on. Keyword strategies were transparent, and success could be earned through effort and insight. Google Analytics was free to use and was an awesome piece of software that benefited publishers, marketers, and Google themselves. It was the ultimate win-win-win. To be fair, Google's continuous push to eliminate low-quality content and combat those trying to game the system was rooted in a legitimate desire to improve the user experience. Punishing bad actors isn't just reasonable, it's necessary to maintain a useful, trustworthy search ecosystem. But as marketers got better at ethical SEO in terms of what worked to improve search placement, Google began pulling up the ladder. Keyword level data disappeared first from organic analytics, then from paid search reporting too. Organic visibility in the SERPs shrank more and more to make more room for ads. Then came the forced adoption of GA4, a frustrating, opaque analytics platform that feels like less of an upgrade and seems to have been deliberately designed to be as non-user friendly as possible in an effort to eliminate the most useful data reporting features. So rather than leaning into collaboration, Google opted for control, and that shift from enabling marketers to gatekeeping them slowly eroded trust and transparency. Now, with AI LLMs in the mix, an alternative has emerged for both users and marketers to leverage. Google's lack of transparency has finally cost them. For years, Google has kept marketers at arm's length, offering vague guidance, contradicting itself at conferences, and hiding behind the ever mystical algorithm. They've withheld critical information about how rankings really work, and in some cases, flat out misled the industry. As marketers, we accepted it because we had no choice. Google held the keys and we played by their rules, even when those rules were unclear, inconsistent, or unfair. To be fair, it's not difficult to understand why Google keeps its algorithmic details under wraps. This is proprietary technology, and exposing too much of it could compromise their competitive advantage or allow unethical marketers to game the system. In fact, the one time they were fully transparent, it backfired in a big way. Around 2012, Google's Matt Cutts publicly stated that inbound links were a major ranking factor. The more you had, the better your site would perform. That single comment triggered a gold rush of link farms, article spinners, and spammy bookmarking networks, all built to game the system. Marketers deployed these services and tactics because it was an effective method to improve SERP position. These practices degraded the quality of search so badly that Google had to launch the now infamous Panda and Penguin updates, two of the most disruptive algorithm changes in the company's history. It was a massive reset that likely cost Google hundreds of millions to engineer and enforce. So yes, their guarded stance is understandable, but it came at the cost of trust. And in the age of LLMs, that's becoming harder to ignore. But LLMs have flipped that dynamic. Unlike Google, which has historically treated its algorithm as a black box, large language models operate on a different foundation, one built around user interaction and continuous improvement. They aren't guarded about how they work because it's in everyone's best interest, especially marketers, that we do understand how they work. The more clearly we understand how LLMs interpret, prioritize, and deliver information, the more effective our content becomes. And unlike traditional search engines, LLMs improve instantly when users provide feedback. Every thumbs up, correction, or refined prompt helps sharpen the model's ability to deliver better responses in the future. This is a fundamental shift. LLMs don't have to guess if the content was helpful based on proxy signals like bounce rates or time on page. They get real-time signals from actual conversations. That's a massive advantage in refining output and accuracy. With Google, relevance is retroactive. It's measured after the fact through metrics like click-through rates, heat maps, and conversion data. Google's algorithm is good at taking a mass of user data and making adjustments on the fly, but it's mostly conjecture. With LLMs, feedback is conversational. The result? A more adaptive, responsive system where transparency isn't a liability, it's a feature, one that smart marketers can leverage right now. No one roots for the empire. It's human nature to seek alternatives. People gravitate toward what feels new, different, or outside the control of dominant players. Apple gained traction not just because of superior design, but because it wasn't Microsoft. And when Apple later faced backlash for its labor practices and other transgressions, some consumers walked. Loyalty to big brands is fragile, especially when better or perceivedly more ethical options emerge. Microsoft learned this the hard way. Despite Bing's improvements and the Edge browser being a very competent tool, it never gained real traction because consumers weren't eager to reward a company they associated with monopolistic behavior. Now, Google finds itself in a similar position, dominant, entrenched, and facing their own antitrust scrutiny. As LLMs enter the mainstream, they're not just competing on capability. They're appealing to a cultural undercurrent that's always looking for the next alternative to whatever feels too big to trust. Is Google search, and by proxy SEO, dying a slow death? SEO isn't dying, it's decentralizing. The dilution of dominance, diversification in a new era. Google's influence over the web is no longer absolute. Its dominance is being diluted, not just by its own strategic missteps, but by the arrival of a broader technological shift reminiscent of the dot-com boom of the late 1990s. Just as the early internet gave rise to thousands of startups, most of which failed, this new AI-driven landscape is spawning a surge of tools, platforms, and interfaces, all vying to become the next standard in how users find and process information. Most of these platforms won't last, but a few will. And just as we saw companies like Amazon, Google, Yahoo, and others emerge victorious from the Web 1.0 wars, while new players rise, the old guard will hold their ground where they can. Microsoft, for instance, swung and missed on search and smartphones, but doubled down on its core competencies, enterprise software and operating systems. That decision allowed them to remain a powerhouse and is once again, at the time of this report, the largest company in the world by market cap, even if they ceded ground for decades in the consumer-facing markets they tried but failed to dominate. Google may be on a similar path. If you look back, you'll notice they intelligently never tried to unseat Microsoft's grip on the PC ecosystem, even though they had the means and brand strength to try. Instead, they expanded their empire by focusing on lightweight devices, Chromebooks, and a web-first application environment, Gmail, Docs, Drive, that offered a viable alternative in adjacent categories. They even took a page out of Bill Gates's playbook and licensed the Android OS to virtually every non-iOS manufacturer around. The lesson here is that specialization becomes a survival tactic when the tide shifts, and time will tell, but odds are we may see Google retreat from its sweeping ambitions and recalibrate toward what it's always done better than any other company on the planet: organizing information, not controlling it. Why LLMs are the future of search. Google has done a remarkable job over the past 2 decades refining its ability to interpret and contextualize short, often vague user queries. They leverage the data from trillions of past searches, user behavior, and semantic relationships. And as a search tool, the real-time output is really extraordinary when you consider how little input it often has to work with. But despite this, Google's biggest limitation is that it's still delivering static results based on what it thinks you meant. And it's up to the user to determine if the search results match their intent, and can only do so after sifting through multiple web pages and possibly additional queries. This has been acceptable for the last 25 years, since the search results were generally good, and it usually only takes a few minutes max to find what you're looking for. LLMs, by contrast, represent a shift from retrieval to dialogue. They offer an interactive experience where users can clarify their needs in real time, adjust for nuance, and go deeper without starting over. This is especially useful when the user doesn't know exactly what they want. ChatGPT, for example, provides the opportunity for the user to describe their needs by using as many words as necessary. For example, imagine a scenario where you open your dishwasher to find a mysterious internal part is broken. You can use your phone to take a picture of the broken part, tell the chatbot the model number of your dishwasher, if it can't already figure that out, and it will then tell you what the broken part is called, the OEM part number, and then it'll give you 2 or 3 links to retailers where you can buy the part. It will then ask you if you'd like instructions on how to install the new part when it arrives. That whole process might take 60 seconds. Now, imagine trying to use Google to solve that problem. LLMs don't just predict what page you want, they engage in a back and forth to better understand what you're trying to accomplish. LLMs like ChatGPT have another advantage over traditional search. They have the ability to ask clarifying questions or request additional information if it's unclear what you're trying to accomplish. This is in direct contrast to a Google query where it will output results no matter what, and it's up to the user to figure it out. LLMs are more than just a fancier search bar. It's important to make the distinction. LLMs are not simply an upgrade to traditional search engines. Search operates on a fixed framework: index, rank, and return results based on very limited information. It doesn't react. It doesn't adapt based on who's asking or why. It essentially treats every query more or less the same, regardless of context, intent, or urgency. Their job is to provide options, not recommendations. If a user doesn't like what's presented, search again. LLMs operate differently. They are built to interpret language, identify intent, carry on a dialogue, and refine responses in real time, and will take as much time as needed to get it refined. The output is shaped not just by the keywords used, but by the implied context, follow-up questions, and behavioral patterns observed across millions of other queries. In other words, AI doesn't just retrieve information, it interprets needs. This is the distinction that changes the game. Search engines tell you where to look. LLMs tell you what to do. They collapse the research phase, skip over irrelevant results, and deliver condensed conclusions that feel personalized because they are. LLMs also achieve what Google tried, but mostly failed to do. LLMs have succeeded what Google tried, but ultimately failed to do: understand the user on a personal level. Google built an entire ecosystem around data collection, email, search history, location tracking, browser activity, voice input, and more, all in an effort to anticipate user needs. But despite that scale, the experience never felt truly personal. It was behavioral targeting disguised as intelligence. LLMs get better the more you use them, not because they're tracking you, but because they're listening. Each interaction builds context, and over time, the experience starts to feel personalized, not in the data-driven ad targeting sense, but in a way that's actually useful. That kind of interaction is rare. It's not something we associate with tools. No search engine, no device, no platform has ever felt this human. The more you engage, the more natural it becomes. And that's what makes it so different from anything that came before. For businesses, this means traditional content strategies built to win clicks and search results are no longer sufficient. Visibility is no longer about being listed. It's about being chosen. And being chosen by an LLM isn't just a matter of keyword relevance. It depends on how well your content demonstrates expertise, answers questions clearly, and fits the pattern of a reliable source. That's why optimizing for LLMs isn't about chasing rankings. It's about becoming the brand that gets used as the example in the answer, whether the user knows where it came from or not. Where LLMs fall short, and why a keyword searchable directory will always have its place. Despite all the advantages LLMs have over traditional search, some fundamentals remain. People will always need a way to quickly and efficiently locate specific information, especially when they know exactly what they're looking for. This is where a traditional keyword searchable directory retains effectiveness. Whether it's finding a local business, comparing product specs, or trying to find the best price on a sprayer arm for their dishwasher, search engines like Google remain unmatched in their ability to provide a structured, browsable index of the web. LLMs are designed to satisfy the end user with the minimum viable output, not necessarily the best possible solution to their problem. Google can output millions of search results to a single query, one page at a time, with the best options at the top, and it's up to the user to sift through the links to find what they want. ChatGPT has to get it right eventually, but relies on direct feedback from the user. In that sense, Google doesn't need to be everything to everyone. It just needs to continue being excellent at what made it indispensable in the first place. The utility of a search engine that allows users to hunt, filter, and compare isn't going anywhere anytime soon. Even as we trend toward an AI first world, there will always be use cases that are best served by the traditional search model. So the foreseeable future likely holds a dual model. Users will leverage AI chatbots for contextual guidance and problem solving, and then use search engines for needs that require more granularity. The two don't have to be at odds, but in trying to blur the line between them, Google risks weakening the very product that established its dominance in the first place. If it can embrace its roots and focus on being the best index of human knowledge rather than an interpreter of it, search will still have a prominent and permanent place in the next era of the web. So, what does the future of content marketing look like in an AI-driven landscape? The role of content marketing is evolving rapidly as AI changes how users seek, receive, and engage with information. While search engines like Google have long rewarded keyword targeted, intent mapped content, the rise of LLMs introduces a new paradigm, one in which personalized contextual understanding shapes the user journey more than keyword mechanics ever did. Content is no longer just about winning SERP placement, it's about being discoverable and useful in conversation. This means content must be more dynamic, modular, and aligned with the kinds of nuanced, problem-solving discussions users are now having with AI tools. Brands will need to rethink content not as static web pages or professional-sounding articles, but as knowledge assets designed for syndication across AI responses, voice interfaces, and interactive platforms. As AI evolves and more users migrate to LLMs as their default platform, the winners will be those who can anticipate not only what users are searching for, but how they're asking and where they're asking it. How the new strategy differs and where it's still similar. User behavior is evolving, and the way we approach content creation must also evolve if we want to remain relevant. Historically, our approach has been one where we focused on high-volume search queries, leveraging tools like SEMrush, Google Autocomplete, and People Also Ask to uncover the most common problems users were trying to solve. Our goal wasn't just traffic, it was authority in the eyes of search engines. We built content around those queries, and the goal was to demonstrate authority in as many areas as possible. We leveraged blog content to win the SERP game for keywords that send actual customers. For many businesses, SEO is primarily a localized endeavor, relatively speaking. If your customer base is in Chicago, as marketers, we don't gain much if someone in Florida finds our content. Our interest is that search engines perceive our web presence as valuable enough to rank our content highly in the SERPs, and also rank our pages for keywords and users that might become customers. So by pleasing the guy in Florida, we're also pleasing Google, which rewards us with better SERP placement for users we do want to attract. I always tell clients that SEO isn't really SEO in the tactical sense. Organic placement for desired keywords is a byproduct of cultivating an authoritative web presence. When you can demonstrably prove an understanding of your customers' problems, Google will reward you with the prime SERP positions. What's changing now is where and how that authority needs to show up. We're no longer creating content just to match search queries. We're creating content that can be understood, interpreted, and referenced by large language models. That means clarity matters more than keyword density. Context matters more than volume. And structure, how we format answers, explain processes, and tell stories, matters more than ever before. But the core principle hasn't changed. The goal is still to demonstrate expertise and solve real problems. We're still building trust. We're just doing it in a way that makes us visible, not only to search engines, but also to the systems increasingly shaping how users receive and act on information. Most SEO principles still very much apply. Even as the search landscape shifts toward AI and LLMs, the fundamentals of SEO still matter because they're still what traditional crawlers expect. Search engines like Google don't truly read content the way people or LLMs do. They process structure. They rely on header tags, title tags, schema markup, internal linking, and metadata to make sense of a page. These signals help them interpret relevance, assign context, and decide where a page belongs in the results. On the LLM side, it's a different story. Language models don't need that structure to comprehend a page. You could drop in the full text of a page with no formatting, and the model would still understand what it's about. But structure still helps. It improves clarity, it makes the content easier to parse, reduces ambiguity, and increases the odds that the response pulled from your content will be coherent, complete, and useful. The bottom line, traditional SEO elements still play a role in visibility, especially in hybrid systems like Google SGE and Bing Copilot. While LLMs may not require rigid formatting, content that is well structured and clear will always perform better, regardless of how it's being read. We still follow best practices not because they're flashy, but because they're the expected standard for both current and emerging systems. In the past, we strategically focused on higher volume queries because it made sense in the interest of resource allocation. But LLMs have changed the game. Every question, regardless of how often it's asked in search engines, now represents a real-time opportunity to demonstrate relevance and meet users where they are in the buying journey. Content strategy is no longer just about targeting demand at scale. It's about cultivating presence across the entire spectrum of user intent. This has always been the holy grail of content marketing, but attempting to be all things to all people is impractical. And from an ROI standpoint, the juice wasn't always worth the squeeze. Google Search as a marketing initiative has always been about trying to capture users who've already arrived at or are near their decision to make a purchase. Search queries can run the spectrum of intent, but the goal of SEO is to drive conversions, not necessarily to educate users in the early stages of their buying journey. Strategically, targeting the tire kickers isn't the best use of our energy when there are more fruitful avenues to pursue. For example, a user who types in cost to replace brake pads is in a different stage than someone querying brake repair near me. But people use LLMs much differently. One study showed that 86% of keyword queries only contain one or two words, and the average Google search only contains approximately 12 characters. This isn't the case with the conversational nature of AI chatbots. This shift in behavior is fundamental. Traditional search has conditioned users to strip their queries down to the bare essentials. Phrases like Mexican food near me or brake repair cost are more than enough to trigger a useful set of results. The implication has always been that after Google returns a list of links, it's up to the user to do the rest. If a Google search returns what turn out to be unsatisfactory results, the user either tries again with a different keyword string, essentially starting the process over, or they simply give up, adopting the assumption that what they're seeking might not be on the web. LLMs, on the other hand, inherently invite users to speak in full thoughts, provide context, and ask follow-up questions without starting over. If the AI provides an insufficient or incorrect response, the user doesn't quit and start over. They continue the conversation. This dynamic creates entirely new opportunities for content to engage earlier in the buying journey. Instead of optimizing only for high-intent, conversion-ready queries, we can now deliver value across the full spectrum of customer decision-making, from the first vague question to the moment they're ready to act. Large language models like ChatGPT can and will substantially accelerate the buying process for many users. Large language models like ChatGPT compress the buying cycle by helping users clarify intent, compare options, and make decisions potentially in as little as a single conversation. What once required a lot of time to perform multiple searches and steps now happens in a fraction of the time, and businesses that aren't visible in those moments won't be part of the decision. As a real-world example, last year I needed an AV switcher. I knew literally nothing about them. Only that I needed one. When I started shopping, I didn't even know what to search for, and in a sea of choices, it was overwhelming. So I hopped on with the chatbot. I started by describing my podcast setup, my goals, and how I plan to use it. After quite a bit of continued dialogue, ChatGPT helped me understand what to look for, which features mattered, and what options were worth exploring. It made some product suggestions that I rejected for various reasons, and we eventually refined it to where it made a viable product recommendation. I still read reviews and did some research. But the bottom line is I went from literally the beginning of the buying process to completing the purchase of a Roland VR 1 HD in less than 2 hours. How this all ties together. At its core, AI isn't creating new knowledge, it's disseminating human knowledge at scale. LLMs like ChatGPT are trained on vast amounts of human created content, allowing them to interpret questions, understand context, and deliver relevant insights in real time. This makes them uniquely powerful tools for marketers, not because they generate something original, but because they connect users to existing knowledge faster and more intuitively than traditional search ever could. In a landscape where relevance, timing, and user experience are everything, AI serves as a bridge between intent and information, helping brands meet customers with the right message at precisely the right moment. It's also important to understand that AI doesn't train itself in the way humans learn. Large language models like ChatGPT are trained by engineers using massive data sets made up of books, articles, websites, and other human created content. The training process identifies and maps patterns in language, reasoning, and knowledge. But once that training is complete, the model doesn't continue learning on its own. It doesn't update itself or absorb new information unless retrained or connected to live data sources. In that sense, AI functions in the moment. It's in use as a frozen snapshot of human knowledge at a moment in time, an incredibly powerful one, but not a self evolving entity. Its value lies in its ability to rapidly interpret user input and deliver relevant, context aware responses based on everything it's already been taught. So, by that logic, why would a marketer want to create new or update existing content that one likely exists in a similar form elsewhere on the web and two AI has probably already been exposed to? At first glance, it might seem redundant to create or modify content that already exists in some form online, especially when AI models like ChatGPT have likely been trained on similar material. But that misses the point. Marketers don't create content simply to add to the noise. They do it to signal authority, intent, and relevance in a specific context, for a specific audience at a specific moment. AI might disseminate knowledge, but it doesn't assign credibility or domain authority. Google and other platforms that surface content still reward the source that demonstrates that knowledge directly, especially when it aligns with search intent and offers a superior user experience. Put differently, AI can echo what's been said, but marketers who publish original content can own the message. They establish topical authority, build brand equity, and create entry points for future discovery, whether it's by search engines, LLMs, or other channels. Content isn't just about saying something smart, it's about saying it in your voice on your platform in a way that builds trust and converts attention into action. That still doesn't explain how creating content for LLMs will send traffic to our site. To answer that, let's metaphorically look at the evolution of something we've all done: ordering a pizza. For years, we had to pick up a phone, mounted to the wall no less, dig through a drawer full of greasy flyers checking the expiration date on each one, and then call the pizza place. After waiting on hold, because they always put you on hold, we'd hope the person taking the order understood us correctly over the sound of kitchen chaos. And if you wanted to compare prices at Domino's versus Papa John's, enjoy starting that whole process over again. Then, when the driver showed up, you paid in cash because that was the system. Eventually, online ordering changed all that and streamlined that process. We were gifted with features like retrievable order history, save payment methods, fewer screw ups, and best of all, no phone calls. Life got easier. And then after that, smartphones came out. Using an app on your phone to order a pizza isn't necessarily any easier than a desktop, but you can do it from literally anywhere. And let's face it, most people are already on their phones anyway. The frictionless option usually wins. This is the important part. What's the next iteration of the pizza ordering evolution? Automation. Your AI assistant will eventually place the order for you with a payment method on file, leaving the standard tip you designate. All you'll have to do is confirm the details. The only thing you'll have to decide is how much autonomy you want to give the AI. So, how does this apply to your business? Earlier, we discussed how people are already migrating away from Google to AI and record numbers. When people reach the purchase decision of their buying cycles, they'll eventually do one of two things. They'll either one, go back to Google to find product or service recommendations, or two, they'll just use the AI platform they're already on to find what they need because they're already on it. Human behavior strongly leans toward number two. Now imagine a world where AI is built into products the same way Google is built into your phone, Siri is built into your home devices, etc. Once user experience reaches maximum optimization, convenience will matter most. By optimizing our content for AI LLMs, we're future proofing visibility. Traditional SEO focuses on getting found in search results. That's still important, but it's no longer the whole picture. LLMs don't serve up 10 blue links, they serve up answers. And those answers are built from the content they've been trained on or can access in real time. That means the goal is no longer just to rank, it's to influence the response. When we optimize for LLMs, we're shaping how AI systems understand our business, our expertise, and our value. We're training them to talk about us, not just around us. And while today's AI models might not always cite sources or send traffic directly, that's already changing. Emerging platforms like Perplexity, Bing Copilot, and Google SGE do link back. And those links are going to the brands whose content is easiest to understand, summarize, and trust. In other words, visibility in an AI driven world isn't just about having the best content, it's about having the clearest, most contextualized, and most reusable content. That's what gets pulled, quoted, paraphrased, and eventually chosen. It's a new form of SEO, not search engine optimization, but semantic ecosystem optimization. We're not just showing up where people search, we're showing up where AI thinks. This is the new SEO. Creating content that resonates with large language models isn't just about future proofing against the rise of AI. It's likely to improve Google rankings too. Why? Because the very same qualities that make content useful to an LLM, clarity, depth, authority, and context, are exactly what Google claims to reward. As Google continues integrating AI into its own search experience, it will increasingly prioritize content that answers questions directly, demonstrates subject matter expertise, and aligns with real user intent. In that sense, optimizing for LLMs is no longer a separate initiative. It's a modern evolution of SEO itself. This is a bet. This is a well thought out bet based on logic, reason, and a ton of research, but it's still a bet. We know LLM adoption is accelerating. We know users are increasingly using these tools as their primary interface, replacing their default behavior and displacing old tools in the process. And we know the content they consume is shaped by what the tools have been trained on or have access to. We've seen this pattern before. New platforms emerge, user behavior shifts toward whatever reduces friction, and those who adapt early usually benefit. As marketers, those who learn to leverage these new platforms are going to separate the winners from the losers in this new shift we're experiencing. That said, no one can predict the future. The pace of change in this space is unprecedented, and it's entirely likely that these platforms will evolve in unexpected ways. It's also not much of a stretch to think that the next biggest company in the world is still hatching in some college kid's dorm room. Google may and probably will continue to adjust course. Perhaps they will become more open or find a way to reverse the current trend and maintain their dominance. But history suggests large incumbents rarely lead the next wave. So, yes, this is a bet, but it's an informed one. And more importantly, it's consistent with how we've always approached digital strategy by watching behavior, identifying shifts early, and positioning ourselves accordingly. We're not chasing trends, we're preparing for what's likely while staying agile enough to respond if and when things shift again. We may not get it exactly right, but we're far more likely to be in the right place if we're already moving rather than waiting to be certain.